Hello 2D design classes. Today we are going to talk about what composition is. So composition is the idea that we're covering for the whole semester. The whole purpose of 2D design is to figure out what composition is, how to make a good composition, and different ways of doing that. So right now I'm going to overview everything we're going to learn, and then the rest of the semester is we are going to go in depth in all of these ideas. So, what is composition? Composition is the arrangement of art elements on a 2D surface or in space. So, like in sculpture, we are only working with 2D surface. So, we are arranging art elements on a surface. We hear composition used in different ways for different, so like for example, music composition is the arrangement of notes or beats. For when you're writing and you're making a composition, you're making like an essay or an article or just, and that is the arrangement of words. So composition in general means to arrange something, and for an art, it's the art elements. So we are arranging art elements. So what are art elements? Art elements are the things that make up art. They're not the tools. They are the tools, but they're not the literal tools, right? You have your pencil, marker, your paint. Those things are tools, but these are. You cannot make art without at least one of these. Line is our usual go-to, right? If I give you a piece of paper and pencil, said here you go, make a drawing, you would start with line, and so that's the easiest to understand. And then these are the rest: shape, space, texture, form, and value, and color. So let's talk about those. So here's line. This is Norman Lewis. He is an artist that worked during the Harlem Renaissance in New York City. This is the same art movement that created jazz, or the group. There was a Harlem Renaissance and artists during that time. Jazz came out of that. A lot of great artwork came out of it. And this is a drawing that he made, very fast moving, very abstract. When you look closely, you start to see figures and other things, but at first glance it seems to be a mess of line. But his primary art element is line. Everywhere you look is line. There's not much more. Shape is created by the line, but that's all. Okay, shape. So shape is an enclosure. To make a shape, you need another art element, usually line, sometimes colors, doesn't matter, but your shape is surrounded, it's the edge of two different art elements. So, for example, we have this black line here, and then we have this color pink. The edge of the line and the color is a shape, right? We have made, it's enclosed by the line. Usually when you make a shape, you have an outer edge, an outer line, but sometimes you just have like one color starts and one color stops. Like here, the yellow. The yellow stops and the red's there, and this becomes a shape. The red is its own shape, bounded by other shapes. Okay. Space. This one is more complicated. So you can see, hopefully in the video you can see this. I don't see myself in the video, so it's hard. But space is the area between two things. So a hairbrush, I'm not sure why that's on my desk, and my phone. And space is in between those two. Space is in between me and my computer. Space is in and around something. So object, here's a wire. There's space in and around it. So I picked this image because it's got a lot of complicated space, right? The space isn't deep, but it's also not shallow. Right away, the closest thing to us is this table right up against, and then the farthest is out the window. So there is this deep space out the window, this middle ground space, and then like this shallow space where we're right up against the object. So the space between us, if we were, say, looking at this in a museum, the space between us and the table is very shallow. It's almost like we're right really, really close. And and then there's these layers of space as we go backwards. And so there's this kind of front layer, this first middle layer right here with these two figures, second middle layer behind this sheet, and then the window. Texture. Texture is the roughness of what we're illustrating. So in this case, it's a drawing. So this is all pencil drawing, and it is the texture of the water, right? We can imagine the water. It looks realistic. If we touch that paper, it would be completely smooth. But in this case, so that it's an illusion of texture. Our mind sees the lights and darks drawn on there, and we know what we're looking at. We know what the feel of water is. We know what texture is, what the texture is. There's a second kind of texture, which is actual texture, meaning it's literally glued on. Maybe it's thick paint or collaged or collage materials. But if you were allowed to, don't ever do this obviously, but if you were allowed to and you touch that surface would be bumpy. So illusion, there is not a real texture. It's all illusion of creating the art. And then there's actual, where it's real. And the most obvious is when you use really thick paint on a painting. Okay, form is the lights and darks. I love this Elizabeth Catlett drawing, or it's not a drawing, it's like a wood, it's a print. But what I love is it's all made of line. When we think of form, a lot of times we think of like blending, like value really smoothly, but you don't have to do that. Your form just needs those lights and darks to make sense. That's called light logic, and if you take drawing, you will learn what light logic is. We'll do a little bit in this class, but drawing, it's a big focus. And using correct light logic, we now have a form. So the light's coming and hitting her face here, and that's creating a shadow over here. And the shadows, like see her nose, there's a shadow there, then light, then shadow, and a little light. It's showing the form of her face. And we now know that she's three-dimensional. It looks realistic. We know how the face is structured. So that's form. Value. So let's see. So value is kind of similar to form in the sense that when we think of form, you have to have value to have form. Where without value, form just becomes shape. It becomes really flat. So shape is two-dimensional, and value is form is three-dimensional. Value, though, really just means from light to dark. So, and all the ranges in between. So black, white, and every gray you can think of. And I think our eyes see 40 different shades of gray. And so all those grays are part of value. This image is all done with pencil, graphite pencil, and and it's very smoothly, right? There's not much line. There is texture, but all that texture is created by how she pushed the pencil across the page. And so we get the illusion of texture in the sheets. illusion of texture in the hair, even her skin, right? All these parts we can imagine. We can imagine what the carpet feels like, what the wall feels like, what the sheet feels like, those things. This is an interesting drawing. We usually have a discussion around it in my in-person classes. But I'll just say really fast what it's about. So Judy Bamber is a LA artist, and she made these drawings in 2011. I saw them in person right after she made them, so it's been a long time now, I guess. But she made all of these images of her mom. So this image right here, when we look at it, it's not something that we would usually make a drawing of our mother. But what was she doing? So what she was doing is she found or was given a whole bunch of photographs that her father had taken of her mother before her mother was her mother, so before she had a baby. So these images are through her father's eyes, as like a partner rather than a father, and so she drew these from the photographs from her father. One thing that I find interesting with that is that I'm a mom, so I have a 4-year-old son, and I thinking about these images, when I think of her daughter kind of making these images of her before she was a mother, it's almost her way of her mother, her daughter, the artist, honoring the person her mom was and is, unrelated to being a mother. So in our culture, and just in the caring for a child, so there's two different parts of that, is the caring for a child takes a lot, and it transforms your identity. But also culture puts the pressure on people to transform their identity also. So you start to lose that, and to have your children see you as someone separate from them, I think is a very validating experience. So that's how I see these images. All right, let's move on. Okay, so color is like my favorite art element because I love color. I love mixing color, and this painting is not Mark Rothko. Okay, let's stop this and then come back and fix it. Okay, here's color. So color is my favorite art element. I love color, I love mixing color, I love putting colors together, color theory, all of that. So this painting I chose is very much an exploration of color and shape and some line. I put down here, this is Alma Thomas. She's an African-American artist. I put the year she was alive. And I mostly did that because a lot of times people assume, like, when people hear the term modern art, they think that modern art is contemporary art, and that contemporary art is the same as modern art, and that this abstract work is modern art. And so that's what is made today. And it's not true. So there's still abstract artists or non-representational artists that make art, live making art, obviously. But there's lots of other kinds of contemporary art, figurative work, more realistic work. So the barriers of art were completely broken open in the early 1900s. And so now, as contemporary artists, we can make almost anything we want using almost any style. The catch really with contemporary is you need to have some kind of, you have to have a reason to make it. So like if you're mean, anyone can make any art for any reason, but if you're making art for this larger contemporary art world, so like kind of where these artists become famous and show in museums and galleries and things like that, they are making, and even lesser artists that aren't doing that but went to grad school like I did, the thing that you need to think of is that what is your position? Why are you making this work? What are you trying to say? How does it relate to contemporary life? What are you pushing past? Are you pushing against or past something that's in our world? Something in the art world, something in the bigger world. So that is what defines contemporary art. What doesn't define contemporary art is a style. And so I always like to point out at some point that an abstract style is not the only art that has made it into the contemporary art world. Okay, not even close. Alright, so let's move on. Okay, what makes a good composition? It's very, once you get really good at composition, right away you can look at an image and be like, that is not a good composition. Before you have a good understanding of composition, when you see a bad composition, you just feel kind of yucky or like uncomfortable looking at the piece. You look at it and you think, I like it. It's done. Maybe this isn't all the case, but say it's a portrait and it's done really well, but something's off. Just feel like it's off. So if you've ever had that experience where you look at an art piece and you don't really know what is off because it looks right, but it feels off at the same time. Sometimes, not always. I mean, with a portrait, it could be like the eyes are a little too close or something. But for a lot of times, when you get that feeling, it's actually that the composition's not very good. And so unless you've studied composition, it's hard to recognize that. And this is why it's really important to understand composition, because it's not something that stands out to the average person unless you've studied it. And so then if you make mistakes, they might like the work, but they don't love it. And composition helps with that, bringing it to the next level. So what makes a good composition? A good composition leads your eye around the whole image. It's unified while also having interest. So you look at the whole image first, and then as soon as you glance at that image, you start moving your eye around the image, and you have interesting things to look at while you're doing that. Okay, so in a regular class, this would be a discussion right now. So I'll just explain what I see, and then you'll have an assignment to kind of do it yourself. So when we're looking at an image, again, so the first thing you see when you see this Artemisia Gentilia painting is the whole thing. You see the two women, the man, the sword, everything. You take it all in for a second. Then you zoom into a part and move around. Everyone is going to zoom into a different part and then start moving their eye around. The point is your eye is being directed. So when I look at it, I look right here first. So right, if you can see my cursor there, at the top of the sword where this woman here's hand is. So I look there. And then I move directly to his face with all the blood shooting out and his head being pulled back. I looked right there. Now, I'm probably going to stay there for a while, but eventually my eye's going to wander, and it's going to wander up her arm because that's directional. Over here, up, down. And I might do this again, but eventually I'll kind of say, like, I've seen that, and I'll go this way. And so this outer peripheral, I will not spend as much time, but I will glance over there, and then I back up and move. So the main part is this oval shape right here. and then once in a while I'll break out of that to look over here. And so the light, how is she doing this? The main way she's doing this is with light and shadow, and so value, and having the light areas she wants you to look at very highlighted. She also has this emphasis point where she wants you to look first, or at least end up at, and you do, right? You keep looking, but you keep ending up right back here. So I like to tell the story of this image because it's such a good story, a sad story, and but also a very powerful story. I don't think sad's really the right word, but so Artemisia Gentilia was a working artist, and so Artemisia Gentilia lived during the 15th and 1600s. She worked as an artist during the Baroque era, and so she was very famous during her time period, and she was one of the only women artists. There were so many barriers to women artists at this time that very few could make it through. Her father was an artist, and he had hired a tutor to teach her more when she was a teenager. The tutor raped her, and that rape went to court. And this is where the story gets even more disturbing. So the court wasn't really about if what he had done was wrong. Rather, he had refused to marry her after raping her. And so her father, Artemisia's father, took him to court to say that he had taken property from her, because technically Artemisia was his property. And so in the court hearings, Artemisia was tortured to make sure that her account of the event was correct. So she was actually tortured while they were interviewing her in the courtroom. And so obviously she had probably some trauma around that, and probably a lot of anger. Now, this painting is not a painting of that event at all. What it's a painting of is Judith, which is this character here, beheading Holofernes, which is this character here. And in the story of Judith beheading Holofernes, which is a story in the Bible, Holofernes was a general, and he attacked a village, burning and raping women and just causing chaos, burning the village and taking over the village and those kind of things. So there needed to be a stop. And so what Judith did is she went to his tent. I think it was a tent, but like house. But I think it was like a tent city kind of thing where more like nomads lived. Anyway, so she went to his tent. She got him drunk, and to seduce him. But instead of seducing him, she cut his head off and killed him, and she was able to save her village. So that is the story. But the reason I tell Artemisia's story is I think the power that this image has, that she is very forceful, muscular, and the women in this have the power, I think is a very strong, it must have, for Artemisia, it must have been a powerful thing to paint. And she painted it lots of times, multiple times. Okay. Alright, next image, back to composition. The first thing we want to think of is, where does our eye go to? So again, I see the whole image right away because it's unified. That's our goal. We want to see it as one, not as separate parts. So I see it as one, and then my eye goes straight somewhere. Now this one, a lot of times students their eye goes in different places than where mine does, and that's okay. But what you're looking for is that your eye goes and then your eye is directed. So for me, my eye goes to the red rose, and then my eye is directed up the tree, and I stop at the little parts like the birds and kind of slowly go up the tree, move down the tree, and then follow the bird, follow the tree, but also follow the birds back to the flowers. I kind of go down this way, follow the peacock over, back up. And I might switch around, like the curve. See my cursor as I go. Maybe one time I go this way, but another time I'm curious and want to see more, so I go this way. So you're not always going the same direction, but you can see the artist has direct your eye around, right? The tree is directing your eye, the branch is directing your eye. The way the direction of the birds are going, that's directing your eye. So this bird has a lot of red, which connects with the red over here. If this bird was painted going this way off the canvas, our eye would then kind of zoom out of the canvas. But rather, this bird is pointed us back towards the canvas, or that's actually a scroll since it's from the 16th century. But it's back onto the image. And that's really important. We want to really think about, where are we directing the viewer's eye? Are we directing them in a place we want them to go, or are we directing them out of the image? Because if we're directing them out of the image with no good reason to come back, all of a sudden, they're going to walk away. They're just going to, I've seen enough, and they walk away. So it doesn't mean that things can't go off the side, right? These things go offside, these things, but there's always, it's not the biggest force. The force isn't bringing us off the side. The force is bringing us into it, in to look at more of the detail. All right, next one. So when I look at this image, my first thing I look at is this woman's face. And she's kind of right there. The light is so blue on her that it's going to be hard not to look at her. Then I move up here to these women, over, around, and this way. So my eye doesn't wander too much in this one. It's kind of always this way, up through them. Here I'm going to wander a little different. So here I'm going to go this way, and then sometimes over this way, and then sometimes more this way. One thing we might not notice is this table. This table is very important to the composition because it's an edge that directs your eye, right? It says stop. Don't look anymore over here. You want to look here. And so you go boom, and you look here. Boom, you look here. Sometimes parts of composition, the things that direct your eye the most may be things you don't even notice or pay much attention to. So it's everything counts in composition. All right, last image. So this is a very simple painting. Sometimes students think, there's not a lot going on here. It's kind of boring. That's okay. Some people think they love the simplicity. Some people don't. It doesn't matter really because you gotta love the art you love. What I ask of you is to be open-minded to the way it's painted and to consider that the artist has crafted experience for you. And what is that experience? And when it comes to composition, it's very much has a direction. It's forcing you into something. So again, you see the whole image as a whole, and then you immediately start looking at the parts. For me, some people say they look right in the middle. For me, I look at this yellow. And then simply this black moves me from color to color. It directs me around. And there you go. Okay. So when we're talking about composition, there are tools to help us make a good composition. And these are the principles of design. So in this class, we're using art elements to arrange into a composition. Then we're using the principles of design to help us design that composition. So these things will help us design. Some of them are absolutely necessary, and some of them you can use when needed. So what are they? Balance, emphasis, rhythm, movement, scale and proportion, unity, and variety. Okay, so balance is just that each side looks the same. One side and the other side. Not the same, so this is symmetrical balance, and they do look like a mirror of each other. It doesn't need to look the same. Sorry, I misspoke there. It needs to have similar weight. One side on the other side, similar weight. It's not that one side is kind of lighter feeling than the other side. You want them to the weight to feel similar. And we'll have a big project about that because that can be kind of hard sometimes. Emphasis is just that something, the artist wants you to look at something more than anything other. This one, it's the grapefruit. Look at the grapefruit. It's right in the center. It's bright yellow. It's important. They want you to look at it. Yes, your eye wanders around, but it always comes back to the grapefruit. Rhythm is that there's a repetition of something. So here we have the repetition of these curvy lines, the repetition of these lines going back and forth, back and forth. And with rhythm, we start to hear a noise. And so for this, we hear like a clap. Or for me, when I think of this, there's like a clap, and then it gets a little quiet as I go up. This kind of is like a haunting noise maybe is happening. These are like a high-pitched noise in the grass. So we can kind of imagine sounds to these repetitions. Movement is very similar to rhythm. We're going to do them in the same project, but it's just how your eye is pushed around the image. So in rhythm, it's these repetitions move your eye around, and they make sounds in your head, where movement is also repetition the repetition is moving your eye. Here, these shapes move your eye all the way up. And there's a repetition in the sense, it's not exactly the same over and over, but it's like the light, the shadow, the light, the shadow, the light, the shadow, the light, the shadow, the light, the shadow. Scale or proportion. Proportion is the proportions within a body or an object, right? So you could mess with that, like have a really large arm on a smaller body. In this case, Sarah is messing, Eisenlohr is messing with the size of the figures. So they're very large, walking on a beach. First glance, they just look like they're walking on a regular beach. Look a second later, half a second later, and you realize that they're walking on a beach that is far too small for their figures, and we have a kind of a juxtaposition, a clash of two visuals together. Unity is when I was talking about composition, is you want to see it as a whole first. So unity is how we create that feeling of a whole, and repetition again is one of them. It's not the only way to create unity. This image is created through repetition of that pie shape, the unity. So we create unity, we look at it, we think this is one image. A scrapbook picture, it's more of lots of little images, and that's what it's like. A photo album, you're supposed to look at the individuals. In an art piece, you're supposed to look at the whole image first, and then you look at the individual pieces, and that's unity is how we create that. Variety is, you need unity, but you also need variety, because if you had the same size circle across a whole painting with no variety of color, shape, pattern, anything, you would probably look at that image for about 2 seconds and then walk away. The variety keeps you interested, it keeps you engaged. So in this, you have the unity of the circles, and then the variety of the pattern and the color and the size of the circles. And so variety is just as important as unity, but you can't have one without the other.